Good evening. Welcome to the 5-8, where we discuss each of the week's 5 most fucked up topics for 8 minutes. 5 topics, 8 minutes, 2 hosts, a guest, some singing, a lot of curse words, and as many cocktails as we deem necessary. LB, how are you?
How are you all the way over there?
I am well.
Yeah.
Notably well.
Notably well.
But
Yeah.
it's nice to be
It's
in
nice
your
to be
company.
together.
Yeah.
Yes, and in your company.
Mm-hmm. And
sometimes we can meet in the middle, and it's lovely, lovely, lovely.
Yeah.
And we may be together
next week.
Next week, maybe not next Friday, but next
Sunday.
Sunday.
Yeah, that's
got that coming up.
Yeah, the Voters for Change, which is cool.
Voters for
up
Change
in Saranac, so we got that. I was going to drive there, but I decided that I'm just going to go to my local Waffle House and teleport to your Waffle House in Saranac.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is possible.
We can teleport. We can teleport using Waffle Houses.
Did they say transport or something? What did they say?
Yeah, I don't know what's the euphemism for
I
teleport?
have no idea.
I don't know.
Does everybody know what we're talking about? You have to explain what we're talking about.
Some guy, some MAGA
Republican
guy. I don't know. I don't even care.
It doesn't matter.
The point is that he legitimately believed that he was able to teleport somewhere using the Waffle House. Which is a great premise for a movie, really.
Do we have Waffle House in New York?
I think it's a Southern thing.
It is a Southern thing.
They're always open.
Didn't know if they creeped their way up to New York. I don't know. Okay, well, it's good to be with you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
There's tremendous weather happening in my home, so it's nice to be where
tremendous weather is not happening.
It's not happening.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we've got a great show tonight, don't you think?
We have a great guest.
Yeah.
We can't say who it is, but her book is right behind us.
Her book is right behind us.
But we're excited to talk to her because she knows a lot about geopolitics. And I don't know if you've been paying attention, but apparently there's a lot of stuff going on.
There's a lot of stuff going on. Yeah. It's like maybe creeping our way into World War III. We'll see what's happening. It's outrageous.
Somebody was saying,
Greg, this is outrageous what we're living through.
It is. Before we forget, and it floats out of my mind.
Yeah.
You know how we have this running joke for people watching that we're living in a simulation, right? And one of the ways that we know it's a simulation is names kind of are similar, or there's like a weird name, like Reality Winner is apparently a person. That's like a clue from the showrunners in up wherever they are that this is a. So Israel bombed this oil field. And it's called South Pars.
Yes.
But it's one letter from South Park. It's one letter removed from South Park.
Yeah.
And every time I see it, I'm like, oh my God, they bombed South Park.
I saw that too. Yeah. It's like, oh no, South Park. And then I'm like, oh no, that's a cartoon.
Yeah.
And this is a glitch.
It's just like, I feel like it's a little glitch. I feel like
it's a glitch. There's some glitches all around. We were joking about that of like maybe this whole era that we're in right now in this sort of broad scheme of things where you could think this is sort of eons and eons of a simulation. God only knows what year it is that we're living in the future. If we go into that thought process, then maybe this has just been an upgrade in the software, like everything now. This is all just like we're just rebooting.
Right.
This is a reboot.
My Mac might install the new version of Tahoe any minute now.
Any minute now. It's 10 years time, but which is what it feels like when there's an update happening on your computer.
It does.
Yeah, but for the simulation.
That happened once when I was leaving like the office to rush home to do the show. I
remember that. Yeah.
And I needed the flashlight to get to the lock, and the phone was updating. And I didn't have a fucking flashlight. So you really have to be careful with this stuff.
You really have to be careful. You could have World War III.
Yeah. Something bad happened. All right. We don't want to keep our guests.
Let's get into it. Let me get the timer going. Timer going. All right. I'm hoping my phone is going to work on all levels. Our first topic is
the laundromat, which is a place where people get their cleaning done.
Yeah.
And in the wide world of criminality, it's a place where money is laundered, and you have
and all of Jeffrey Epstein's dirty underwear shows up with his all of his dirty socks, his single socks. We're in the Jeffrey Epstein laundromat. I just wanted to, because you and I were talking, and just remind everyone of I hate the phrase sort of bigger picture, but it just sort of pull away and look at using history, look at what we're dealing with here, contending with here when it comes to Epstein, because we were talking about, we want to keep this in the conversation and just keep updated on it, not let all of the the distractions that maybe came into being to distract away, whether or not they in and of themselves are serious things that we have to pay attention to, like bombing Iran, getting into a war with Iran. So it was like, so what is really happening with Epstein? And for me, just to keep that in the conversation and keep that in the forefront for all of you guys. And for me, what I feel like is starting to get lost a little bit in this sort of call and cry for releasing and unredacting and having politicians involved, thank God, for the last few months. And is this the way to think about it, like the way I approached, which is how I found Jeffrey Epstein's, some of his offshores, the way you approach sort of, and Elizabeth Friedman taught us to approach looking at crime syndicates. If you think about Jeffrey Epstein and what he had, he built, he developed, he inherited, what it was a system. And it was a system for that used human beings, girls, as a commodity, not just for his own deviancy and criminality, but to extort from others, whether it was extorting control, right? It's like, I'm going to set you up with this, and now I've got tapes with you, what people call blackmail, compromise, if we're going at it from an intelligence point of view, but just what the criminality of that sort of aspect of it. It was, those are sort of the actions of everything, but underneath, this only works on the scale that he was running the operation. That kind of operation only works if there's a structure underneath it, a system in place underneath it, by which, especially when you focus on the money, which is why we focus on the money, you can cover up, conceal, all through all these different vehicles that he used, whether it was through the offshores that was hiding money, however it was he was taking money from the banks and the banks bankrolling him, how he was shielding himself and individuals through that process, the process of and the systems of the transactions, the structures that he set up so that there was concealment of what the money was actually used for or being paid for, being paid to him for, and who it was coming from. So there's a lot of searching through the money of the very little bits we have, trying to find, is it coming from Russia? Is it coming from where was the mass amounts of money coming from? If it was coming from Deutsche Bank or through other bankings, what were the other banks? The JP Morgan Chase. Then how was it coming through that? How is it coming through that in a way that didn't? And even if it was bringing up these SARS reports, the suspicious activity reports, how were those suspicious activity reports being ignored or concealed, or that's a system. That's a machine. I always think of it as a machine. And when you use the word machine, people, like a laundromat, like a washing machine, people click into that and understand, oh, okay, we've got lots of moving parts here, and someone put together something very sophisticated by which they could push all of this money around. If there wasn't money involved in Epstein's operation, the operation wouldn't have existed. So the money is the biggest part of it to look at, and the criminality is, of course, the most tragic part of it in terms of you've got survivors, but you're going to catch them by the money, just like Elizabeth Friedman was Elizabeth Friedman, who was the godmother of the National Security Agency, and how the NSA, what's now the world's largest intelligence agency and most sophisticated, most powerful in the world, how it came into being was a woman named Elizabeth Friedman. I did some work about her in the World Beneath. Was the person with her husband who developed the science of cryptology, science of decoding an encrypted message, right, without having the key. So that's a methodology and a science that she developed. Of course, there have been encrypted messages, coded messages going from the origins of time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that she created that. It's that she created the system by which, and the science by which you can crack the code without having the key, because you used to always have to have the key to crack the code. Some are easy to figure out, and she organized them and labeled them and just perfected this thing, right? With her, a man who then became her husband. So they were the experts, the Friedmans. And then sort of like World War I, they decrypted and decoded all of the messages from that war because radio was new. And so they were getting radio signals. The army turned and the president at the time turned to Elizabeth and her husband and with these young people and said, we need you to decode every single coded messages that we're intercepting over these radio signals. And they did it. She learned in the process that decoding, right, which is what we're kind of trying to do, which is like the redaction, unredact the Epstein files. And everybody's trying to read the tea leaves of what's actually in there and who are the people and map it all out. We're trying to decrypt it, right? It would be great if we just had it all unredacted, then we'd see it in plain sight. Mm-hmm. And there might still be some code words and things they're using, but we can, once the redactions are gone, once you have cracked the code, what you see actually is the system, the network in place. So Elizabeth Friedman was brought in by Elmer Irie, head of the Treasury, because they were trying to catch Al Capone. It wasn't the mythology of what everybody thinks it was the Treasury Department. And he so wisely, head of the Treasury at that time, so wisely understood that they needed someone to crack because they were intercepting, the Coast Guard was intercepting all of these coded messages being sent over radio from what they suspected were rum runners. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's how she got pulled in to start hunting down gangsters. And what she did she said, well, I'm going to need different people from all these different agencies to help me in this because this is a law enforcement endeavor and we need to crack these codes. But also it's going to show us, just real quick, what the system is, how are they moving these illegal booze around? What are the shipping routes? What is it? What is this? Where's the money? Where's the money going? She brought her husband in, who was working with the banks at the time, to try to get and the army in sort of a classified manner to see if they could figure out how the money was being moved around by the people that were working for Al Capone with these rum runners. And so she mapped it out. And she mapped it out with several different law enforcement agencies, and the combination of those law enforcement agencies and that decryption the signals and decoding them is what became the the NSA. Okay. So that's, I gave you a lot of history. Sorry, it wasn't as short as I wanted to be, but my point being, she was able to even figure out how money was coming in from, and nobody even fathomed it at the time, from the Far East. Mm-hmm. There were diamonds being smuggled in. There were drugs being smuggled in. It wasn't just booze. There were people being smuggled in. So it was a network. And she traced the network. They found the money. The money became the thing that allowed them to nail Al Capone, because the crimes that they could actually prove at the time with the laws that were on the books was that he was not paying taxes on this vast amount of wealth. But you can't show that if you can't show the network. Doesn't matter if you just show a bank account. You have to show the network and the profits that he was making and how he was making that legally or illegally. He was criminally not paying his taxes. So away to jail he went. That is what had Meyer Lansky, his partner, found offshore banking. That's where offshore banking comes from, what people call the laundromat. And that system is the system that Jeffrey Epstein plugged himself into in his operation, which it very much looks like he inherited from Robert Maxwell, right? Swapped out the trafficking to have it be girls and human beings, and the blackmail to be that crime of raping children, is what it was, and capturing the people that they needed to compromise on that. But that also is plugged into a monetary system. Mm-hmm. With all the levels of control. And he brought new things to it. He brought a Ponzi scheme to it. He brought all kinds of shit to his network. Here's what we know. Those things don't go away. They don't go away just because the guy dies. whether he's murdered, whether it's suicide, whatever it is. The system is still there, and it's incredibly valuable, and very powerful forces were engaged in it, or it wouldn't have existed in the first place. It's not a one-man operation. So if anyone believes that those very powerful forces just shut that all down, I don't know. I got a bridge to sell you. It's the most naive thing ever. It certainly wasn't all shut down with Al Capone.
No.
It became the offshore laundromat, didn't it? Yeah. It wasn't shut down with the when the five families, when they cut their heads cut off, it became a Russian operation. That's what Mogilevich rolled up and took over. They wanted Lansky's laundromat. Jeffrey Epstein was using it. And he developed his own niche within it that had all of that compromising material and all of those systems of concealment when it comes to the money. Who has it now? That's the question we all need to be asking. Who controls that now? It didn't go away, I promise you. And there's no way in hell that those powerful forces turned their back on something that took that long to build and is that sophisticated and has its origins from over 100 years ago. It's only grown. It's only gotten bigger. It didn't go away. So who has it? It's not just to follow the money. Following the money gets us to answers. I'm trying to let you see there are people on the other end of that money that still exist today and are still doing this. Are they doing it with trafficked children? I don't know. Maybe they're doing it with weapons.
Maybe they're doing it by starting a war in Iran so that they can profit from it.
Yeah.
As an unofficial liaison to the United States to Putin.
Maybe they're doing that.
To name but one example.
What's in it is the ability and the power to control the powerful forces that are at hand. Mm-hmm. So everybody should just be looking to who's got it now.
Yeah.
Who's got it now?
The other piece that I want to just say about Epstein is, if he had not decided and had his little, depraved thing going with underage girls
himself.
Yes. If he just stuck to trafficking non-minor girl, he would still be working right now. He would still be alive. And he would say what caused him to fall really was, I think, that it was because he got too toxic because of his personal, weirdness and depravity.
Right.
And
I don't know that he's the one who started doing the trafficking of the younger children.
No, but he partook.
Roy Cohn certainly had a history of that.
Anyway, we should move on.
Yeah. But it's just something to think about. It's just, you had a much more blunt answer, a funny answer before, but I think everybody got.
Look at Mr. Ivanka and
yeah.
There's a guy.
Maybe there's a reason why Donald, and I've been saying this for how long?
10 years. 10 years.
Why is he so afraid of Jared?
Yeah. Why?
Why is he afraid of Jared? He is. I'm sorry. He's afraid of him. That first term, Jared could take credit for anything that Donald did. If anyone else tried that, they're out. Jared just kept doing it and doing it. Donald would even come out and say, hey, I've done this, I've done that. I'm not calling Donald because he hates it. I've done this and I've done that. And then in comes Jared, and Jared takes credit for the whole thing. And he just shrinks.
Yep, he shrinks.
The only time for that kid. And I know he's a grown man and people hate it when I call grown men kid. I don't. That's a child. It's not even his child.
It's very weird. It is.
No one could talk about him. No one could criticize him. No one can touch. Why is Jared so untouchable? And why is Donald afraid of him?
I wrote a piece in 2019, I think 2018, about all the laws that Jared had already broken and could be indicted for.
Mm-hmm. No one will do it.
It was like 8 years ago, and only gets worse every year that goes by. More and more.
Make sense.
Let's do 5 minutes on this real quick.
Okay.
We don't want to keep her waiting. So this is called we're going to talk more about the geopolitical stuff, but like, I don't understand. And there's lots going on now, obviously, and the Middle East is a mess. We attack Iran, Israel attacks Iran, Iran sends these drones all over the place to all these other countries. Everyone's getting pulled into this. And then Israel's like, oh, Lebanon's not involved yet. Let's just bomb the shit out of them. And they bombed a big apartment building in southern Lebanon. And apart from everything else, just pull away from the sort of, who it is and this and that, and this person did this first and all this crap. I don't think it's ever justified. And how could it possibly ever be justified to bomb an apartment building where people are living? Just because you warn them that you're going to do it an hour before, that doesn't, great. You save some lives, but their fucking house is blown up. I just don't think there's any justification for it. I don't understand it. I don't understand what the purpose of it is in a non-cynical way. Cynically, I understand the purpose. The purpose cynically is to create chaos and create displaced citizens and create a problem in Europe and everywhere and keep the whole rest of the Middle East weak so that the country doing this can be strong. Cynically, that's I get. But what the hell is the actual non-war crime excuse
reason?
For blowing up an entire apartment building? I don't know. I don't get it. They say Hezbollah has people that are living in the apartment building. Okay. Hezbollah has people living in Tel Aviv. We're not bombing Tel Aviv. Why are we bombing it? What about everybody else that lives there? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. And it's one of these things that I think in the overall cacophony of stuff going on now between Trump and Pearl Harbor and
oh God,
all that shit, and then the Epstein stuff, and you've got Kushner and Witkoff and Moscow and the Joe Kent Tucker. There's so much stuff going on and violence, and Lebanon always gets kind of avoided, but it's been basically every time there's any kind of war going on, Israel's immediately like, let's just go bomb the shit out of southern Lebanon. And I get it. I know that they're being attacked by Hezbollah. I get it. I get all that. And you want to, if somebody's bombing you, you're going to bomb them back. Fine. But I don't understand in any reality why it would be okay, why it would not be a war crime to blow up an apartment building anywhere in Lebanon, in Tehran, in Tel Aviv,
a residential,
in New York, anywhere.
Targeting civilian
it's
property.
A fucking war crime. Always. That's it. That's all I got. Fucking war crime. It's terrorism.
Yeah, it's terrible. I so agree with you. I also, it just feels, if you're going to give people the warning because you don't want civilians hurt or whatever the excuse is, or maybe you just don't want to be called a war crime because you gave, but then you're bombing something where civilians are. Like it doesn't make sense if you just scratch it a little deeper and think about it. Is the building attacking you? Like, what the fuck?
It's very strange. It's like, I can't even think of the right analogy. It's like, hey, there's one guy who once flew at this airport on a plane who was a bad guy. Let's blow up the airport. You don't do that. Because you just don't do that. It's blowing up infrastructure. And all that does is cause chaos and devastation and, hundreds of thousands of people displaced and, thousands of people dead. For what? The war ain't going to stop. That we think that's going to stop them from hitting again. It's just very depressing. Anyway, that's all I got.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Now, speaking of, and the other thing is, I don't know if you've been following this story, but there is a non-zero chance, if you've been following this story on the internet, there is a non-zero chance right now that Benjamin Netanyahu is dead and Jeffrey Epstein is alive. That's the
I can't even
ridiculous reality that
this
we're living
is what
in
we're
now.
in.
And is this the right one?
Oh
yeah, this is the right one. This is the right one.
I wonder what he is.
I don't know.
It's been 2 weeks. Was I blown up by a rain? You asked for proof of life. Well, count the fingers on my hand. Sipping apple latte. Is it really me? Is it really me? With Mike Huckabee. I'm Netanyahu. But am I real or AI? I'm Netanyahu. Yahoo. But am I dead or alive? Netanyahu. Yahoo. Am I dead or alive?
Junk. Beautiful, beautiful.
Well done. Well done on you, too. When I just read the lyrics, I was just dying. Oh, my God.
But it's crazy. It's a crazy story.
It's a crazy story. It's a crazy story. We'll get to this. I just want to make this one thing.
Yeah.
Like, we were all warned about this from Obama and from like that, like there's going to be these deep fakes and it's very dangerous. And, you know, people at the highest level of intelligence and also the presidents saying this is coming. You won't know real for fake. Here are the horrible scenarios. We could have someone could be dead and they could be a nation could be putting forth that the leader's there and making decisions, but that we won't know. Literally spelled out that scenario for us. And then here we're kind of looking at it. We're like, is that what's happening? What is this? And there's silence. There's silence. Or, oh no, he's not dead. You're just buying into stuff. It's like, you know.
He's got 6 fucking fingers in the video. It's like, what is going on?
You told us this was coming.
Yeah.
You warned us. You know, we weren't hair on fire. I didn't know this was coming. I was told by Obama and by senators, and intelligence professionals, that this was coming.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm watching it, and where the fuck are they? Where are they? Has anybody heard from them?
No, they are. No.
They're as quiet as can be.
Yeah, I don't know.
It is gaslighting on next level. This is next level gaslighting.
Twitter's been very amusing this week.
I can't. As I said to you, I've got underwear older than, you know, when we were warned about this.
I know.
We're old.
I know.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Our guest is a professor at Arizona State University. She's the director of Future Frontlines and an author of this tremendous book behind me, Putin Sledgehammer. Welcome back to the show. Candace Rondeaux, how are you?
Candace.
Hey, great to be back, guys. Good to see you, LB and Greg.
Good to see you.
So do you have now you've been patiently watching the show. I did see you laugh during the song, which is good. That always makes me happy.
Yes.
We like laughter and not people running away.
Yeah.
There's the one guy that time.
Yeah.
But all this stuff that we've covered so far, do you have anything you want to comment on that we've already talked about before we?
I mean, I can always talk about networked money and power, but maybe we should get into the real stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, we talked before everything went on. Are we is this World War III now? Like, what's going on here? Is it really going to be this next thing where there's a combination of the things in World War, or does it even matter? Like, what's your take initially on what happened? What did you think when we bombed Iran? What was the first thoughts that you came to your head?
God, the first thing I thought was, what the hell? Just like everybody else. But yeah, I mean, is this World War III? Nobody likes to talk about that. It's not good for insurance rates. It's not good for the banks. It's not good for the market to talk about World War III. But we do have some intersecting factors, right? We have a choke point with the Strait of Hormuz that is literally carrying something like 20% of the world's oil around the world, and yet we can't get any ships through it. We have Dubai, which is like, the hub of all aviation for Asia and Africa. I mean, you couldn't get a bigger choke point. And I think if you combine that with what we see, for instance, in Ukraine, and obviously, we've got this kind of ongoing ripple effect from the Gaza war, we're looking at a lot of actors, not just the United States and Israel and Iran, who are deeply impacted by conflict right now and have a lot of intersecting interests that are kind of conflicting with each other. And I think we're starting to see that as Trump reconsiders or talks about winding things back or winding things down, this is a clear example of a man who is facing his miscalculation and staring it down, and saying, what have I done, essentially. Oil prices are up, gas prices are up, fertilizer is up. There's nothing that hasn't been touched. There's no market in the world that has not been touched by this war in Iran. So it looks pretty close to World War III. I think what would sort of put it over the threshold is if we started to see the Gulf allies retaliating against Iran. So far, they've been very disciplined, largely because they don't really have the kind of machinery that they need to sort of foment a war against Iran. But we heard from Saudi Arabia yesterday, that if there are more attacks on the oil and gas infrastructure, that they're all in. And once Saudi Arabia piles in, you can believe that UAE is going to have to pile in, and then it becomes a free-for-all. So I think now it's a matter of sort of time to see whether or not the U.S. and Israel can square their own objectives, because we see also some splits there between Netanyahu and Trump on sort of like what is the end goal. Of course, nobody really has said what the end goal is in a very clear way, but we're darn close. We're real close.
Yeah, that's not good. Now, there's all these sanctions that are happening now. There's all this economic, like the tariffs are so stupid and such a an own goal kind of thing.
Yeah.
But now he's, with the sanctions, he wants to now lift the sanctions on Russia, lift the sanctions temporarily on Iran. And today he lifted the sanctions on Belarus in order to bring the gas prices down. But like, if we're at war with a country, why are we lifting the sanctions on that country? And then there's the whole Putin factor, but that's a whole other question. Yeah. So talk a little bit about the sanctions.
Yeah, I mean, this is Trump kind of coming up against the limits of American economic statecraft, which has been winding slowly like a boa constrictor around almost every part of the world, right? There's really no place in Africa, the Middle East, or Asia that hasn't been impacted. If you think about sort of sanctions against China, sanctions against Iran, against Russia, against North Korea, all of these countries also have a lot in common in terms of sort of their trade balances, their relationships, particularly with the global South, the kind of dependency that they have with, Africa, the Middle East, Asia. And, for the better part of 15 years or so, that sanctioning tool, we've kind of come back to it again and again as a way to sort of balance against military power. And now we find actually there's only so much sanctioning you can do before essentially you've sort of sanctioned yourself entirely out of an entire market, right? And I think the other reason we're seeing now Trump reconsider, again, it just goes back to his main miscalculation, right, was striking at a place that has such a huge control over such an important chokehold for the world economy. But leaving that aside, his other miscalculation, as we all know, has been the way he's dealt with allies. If he had consulted Europe beforehand about not just this particular version of the war, right, going back to in June of 2025, right, we might be in a very different situation. You might feel a little bit more sort of cooperation, or at least willingness on the part of European allies, if not to support openly, certainly not get in the way of and quietly allow for basing. Now, we have seen, for instance, Britain, and France quietly sort of say, yes, we're willing to support. But, as far as a naval, escort, that's not going to happen. And frankly, when you start talking about invading Greenland, you lose a lot of friends pretty quickly.
You lose a lot of friends. And when you talk about NATO and beat up people, and it's just insane. Like, no one, especially, that's just an abuser, who beats you up and says it's for your own good, right? They're doing you a favor, which is what he did to everybody. And then turn around and realize, oh, I need you. So, aren't you going to show up for me? It's just.
Yeah. I mean, it's amateur hour, right? I mean, this is actually a total misunderstanding of American power, which for the better part of 80 years has rested on our alliances. Right. You don't really just do alliances, in the context of military warfare. The sanctions themselves really are effective because Europe, because other countries, Canada, right, the UK, have all said, yes, we will come in with you, right, on punishing Russia, punishing Iran, because we believe that the end goal of using diplomacy and economic statecraft is a better path forward. Now we have a situation where all bets are off because Trump has jettisoned every basic aspect of American power and influence.
Okay, so here's sort of my question about the relationship between Donald and Putin. It did feel like in the beginning to me that we were, and it sort of looks like objectively that we're in this proxy war, even though we're sort of foot forward in it, where it can be sort of, this is Israel and Iran, but it's really United States and Russia, right? Except it's Putin is now saying we're it seems like we're in this, God only knows why, like the reasons for it all keep changing, but certainly a benefit that Putin is getting out of it is he's now putting the card on the table. I'll stop attacking. I'll have Iran stop attacking U.S. troops. I'll stop helping Iran hit, your allies and U.S. and U.S. we'll talk about the cloud in a second. If you completely stop with Ukraine.
Right.
So was that the chip that was the whole, have we finally got to the reason for this war?
Right. Is that the full house? Is that the royal flush?
Is this it? Is to give him the opportunity to put something on the table that would have the lawmakers in our nation who have been, holding the line to some degree, keeping, even though as much as Donald's been trying to trash and wreck our support of Ukraine and just hand Ukraine to Putin, certainly lifting all the sanctions, helps him continue in the war that Putin's waging on Ukraine, that horrible terrorist at the Kremlin. But I just feel like this was always the card waiting to be put down on the table.
Absolutely. I mean, in some ways, it's an ironic moment because only 2.5 weeks before the start of the war in Iran, the United States had begun targeting Russian flagged oil tankers. Right? We saw the Bella 1, aka the Marinera, out of Venezuela. Remember that whole chase that happened in early January that ended up with U.S. Coast Guard and Special Forces, Russian tanker. So the United States and frankly, Europe had made some sort of coordinated decision to start cracking down on these oil fleets in a sort of rare moment of kind of cooperation between these, seemingly sort of,
strained allied relationships.
Strained allied relations. Suddenly, you saw these interdictions happening on these tanker fleets, literally like only 2 weeks before the start of this war, right? And so the idea was, one, we're putting pressure on Russia. We're putting pressure on Iran at the same time. And we're showing China that we can, cut off its oil supply or at least hinder its access to oil. And then boom, like that, right? It all sort of just disintegrates like overnight. I think in some ways, what this can do is be a kind of confidence building measure. And I think by the same token, the lifting of sanctions on Belarus and fertilizer, is kind of a similar sort of idea here, is to telegraph, this is what you get if you come to the bargaining table. And even the tanker, interdictions were in some way sort of a signaling that this is what you get if you don't come to the bargaining table, right?
Right.
And so let's leave aside the tremendous miscalculations and the kind of like brain distortions that seem to be happening within the administration that are leading to all of these very bad decisions when it comes to Iran. Let's leave aside that for the moment and just sort of pretend that there's some sort of rationale.
That we know what we're doing.
That we know what we're doing. I mean,
okay.
In actual fact, you do have to up the stakes. You do have to up the pressure on Russia because they weren't really coming to the table with anything serious. I think Zelensky alluded to that many times over the last couple months, that despite the fact that they've kind of come with a little bit more to offer on the Ukrainian side, The Russians really just haven't shown any will, right? And interestingly, all of this is occurring as there's a change a little bit on the Ukrainian battlefield. I don't know if you noticed that, but this wiping out of Starlink terminals for Russian forces and the shutdown of Telegram, this has been a huge hit for Russian forces on the front line. And we've seen incremental changes in Zaporizhia, for instance, where there's been some advances by Ukrainian forces. So, it's kind of like the card table has been basically overturned. It's not even like anybody has anymore, right? It's just sort of like all up in the air. And we're just playing war and throwing cards at each other.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
It's really interesting to me, like the kind of the weapons of war that are being used now. Like, Ukraine, it's been 4 years and the whole way the war is being fought has morphed in that time period to now being completely about drones. Our friend Zarina was on the show last week and comes on from time to time, is in Kherson in eastern Ukraine and has been reporting on all the human safari stuff out there, and now talks about these fiber optic drones and all this other stuff. But that Iran invented these really great drones and manufactures them, and is a world leader in that technology. And we took an Iranian Shahed drone and reverse engineered it to create one of our own. And I don't know, does Trump even know that? Like, why would you go
he's got he's doing the memes with the fast cuts.
Yeah.
Of Tom Cruise and
right.
That's what's going to end the war.
But I guess my question is, what do you think? How do you think that the way that the Ukrainians have adapted to the drone warfare, sort of, in my view, I think has risen their power, them as a power. How will that affect everything going forward, do you think?
I mean, that is definitely a card right in Zelensky's deck now that he can use. I was in Ukraine a little bit over a year and a half ago, and I had the opportunity to visit with some of the folks at the Ministry of Defense, and they showed us, of course, a lot of the Shahed debris, of course, that they picked up from the battlefield. And they're explaining, I mean, they have like a whole bunch of people who are just, picking these things apart and studying the ways that the Russians are changing and adapting this Shahed drone technology in order to overcome the Ukrainian defenses, right? Using electronic warfare, using interceptors. And, if there's anybody who knows sort of like, it's really encyclopedic knowledge in Ukraine in terms of just how to defeat Shahed drones. They've picked them up. And I think, they've been advising the DoD for the last year or so on the creation of these Lucas drones, right? You just alluded to the ones that are sort of been reverse engineered. Well, it's kind of like reverse engineering of reverse engineering, because, of course, the engines on the Shahed drones came from Germany. Some of the, computer chips came from the United States. So it's a hodgepodge of Western material.
It's a global marketplace.
It's a global marketplace. Yeah. And now these Lucas drones they're super interesting because they're manned with Starlink terminals, right? And so they can be very direct. They can be redirected. They can move, very agilely as sort of hitting mobile targets. So it's sort of an upgrade from what Iran has created. And actually, the Russians sort of had decided, look, we're done with you. Thanks very much for the material and the design, but we're going to make our own stuff basically. Now the question is, will all of this oil money help them do a similar upgrade, right, on the Russian side? Will they find a way to put terminals on their drones and turn it into, I don't know, a Mikhail drone, who knows, a Misha drone? I mean, that's a serious question, but the evolution of the Ukrainian drone technology, but also the know-how. We've seen now, I think, a couple hundred Ukrainian soldiers, or at least, drone specialists kind of loaned out to the Gulf states who are doing some advising. But this has been going on for a while, right? They've been sort of testing this, the Ukrainians, in places like the Sahel, where they faced off against Wagner forces, gave some rebel forces there in Mali, and also in Sudan and in Syria. So the Ukrainians know what they're doing. They understand, in their minds, this is World War III. And, penetrating the global market with their expertise is kind of key to their survival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're going to, I mean, it could just end when the dust settles and the smoke clears, literally and figuratively, I suppose. we're going to have Ukraine is going to have the biggest standing army in Europe and all this drone stuff.
I mean,
it's the biggest country that's fully in Europe, other than Russia, and it's going to have this big thing. And I don't know. It's interesting to watch the sort of modulation of it.
Yeah,
but,
and I don't want anybody ever having them sign anything where they give that away.
No, I don't think they're going to make that
let's
mistake.
not do that twice.
I don't think.
Okay, so you had written about the cloud storage and how we need to think about the resources, I guess the best way to think about it, the resources that are being targeted now, and the effects of it in this ambling into World War III moment that we're in. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, so you might remember, I think it was on March 1st, so like the second day of the start of the Gulf War, third Gulf War, and there was a strike. 3 drones, Shahed drones, smashed into 3 Amazon Web Service hyperscale data centers. 2 were in the UAE and 1 was in Bahrain. The 2 in UAE were completely flattened. I think the one in Bahrain was pretty badly damaged, but what was interesting about it was technically, when you build these data centers, and Amazon's sort of model is, we're going to build redundancy. So if one of them goes down, the other 2 should still work, and they still should be connecting. But Iran peeped that, obviously, and simultaneously hit all 3 of them, knowing that it would pretty much black out most of Bahrain, right? And black out a big portion of the UAE's economy, basically, because essentially banking services, logistics, aviation, they have their own special kind of Uber. That platform went down, and Bahrain's government had about 80%, 85% of its government services were on this Amazon Web Cloud. And of course, Amazon hadn't planned for that. This has been a big controversy amongst folks who kind of look at the way conflict and technology intersect. The International Red Cross, ICRC, has been warning for years that when you pair up a civilian company like Google or Amazon building the cloud, and you put it together with military capabilities, whether it's sort of hosting an AI service or hosting communication service that the military uses, or you even put it proximate to a military target, you are asking for trouble. And that's exactly what happened with the Amazon Web Service. I think what's happened now, it's really kind of made people sort of think about sort of the actuarials, like what is the risk here going forward? Of course, the Gulf, we got to keep in mind, in the last 5 years has seen probably upwards of $20-30 billion pouring in for AI data centers and services, all predicated on the idea that these big oil and gas producing countries have a limitless, reserve of energy. They don't have the same problem as some other parts of the world. AI is a really energy hungry technology. So the idea was like, we are in bonanza land. This is going to be the El Dorado, right, of like AI revival. But in actual fact now, there's a whole reassessment, I think, in the industry as to whether or not you can safeguard these types of infrastructure. And that leads to a lot of questions, especially for Amazon, for Google, for a lot of American tech companies who've invested so heavily, especially as we get more and more in these sort of contested geopolitical situations. You can't do it all with like robots and missiles. At some point, some people are going to have to start building this stuff underground. They're going to have to think about sort of edge AI, which is sort of taking a little bit more mobile and moving things in a way that they can be protected. But that's going to cost a lot. With a $2.3 trillion AI industry, I don't think they factored this part in. And so I think the entire industry is going to have to reassess exactly what is the premium for keeping the lights on and keeping the cloud alive while we're at war.
Yeah, I read that, and it was something I never even really thought about before. Like you say, the language is important. It's called the cloud, but it ain't on a cloud in real life. It's exists.
And we might have to bury it underground.
Right.
Yeah.
The opposite of the
the
cloud.
opposite of the cloud.
Go into
the lava. What is it? What's down there?
Out of the magma.
Magma. Yeah.
We'll
call it them. Oh, don't give them any ideas. These goobers that own these companies are going to start calling something magma.
I don't know. I heard it took like half of the Bahrain energy thing to make those Netanyahu AIs. That's what I heard.
Yeah.
It's a joke, I think.
That's a joke, maybe.
Maybe. I don't even know.
Yeah. I mean, they have plenty of money to start, but it's these people don't want to part with the money that they have. So,
right. I mean, that's a really, if you're Saudi Arabia, if you're the UAE, you got these sovereign wealth funds. In theory, most of the AI industry in the Gulf has really been built off the back of these sovereign wealth funds. But if you are a smaller provider, or you're kind of like a, auxiliary provider through the bigger industry, forget it. You are not going to have nearly enough capital to cover your potential risks or losses. And that is just going to change the entire game, especially for, companies that are not Google, right? And companies that are, even frankly, some of these larger big tech companies, they are going to have to reassess. And they're going to have to ask themselves whether or not they can afford that kind of risk. Building underground, most of that is actually happening in the States because of fears of terrorism, right? And the idea that, somebody could use some of these FPV drones, right? Sort of hobbyist drones to attack data centers. Could happen, but it's much more likely to happen in a place like the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah. So I want to ask also about Russia, because that's your biggest area of expertise. And you were saying, now what's the take about Putin now? I mean, he's been in charge of the country for 26, 27 years. He's 4 years into this catastrophe war that has no signs of ever ending on his, it's not like they're winning or they have anything to show for it. On the other hand, he's got all, he's I guess, basically conquered the United States insofar as his puppet is in the White House, and everything that's playing out in the Middle East is helping him. But is he as strong as he used to be? Is he weaker? Are there plots afoot to maybe, regime change Moscow? Like what are you hearing and seeing?
Yeah, I mean, if you're watching Russian news, or if you're looking at Telegram or social media, and sort of paying attention to the Russian headlines, there has been a lot of chatter about a couple of things that have happened in the last 2-3 weeks in and around Moscow and some of the major cities like St. Petersburg. One is the placement of these sort of electronic warfare shields and a lot of checkpoints now with sort of military material, gear, and kit just in the streets. Something that we hadn't seen before. So certainly a sense of changing posture, at least in Moscow and in St. Petersburg, a sense of maybe foreboding and fear. But the second piece that people are really kind of getting nervous about is the fact that the mobile internet has been basically turned off, right? So, you use your phone, you're out in the street trying to call mom or do like an order of pizza or whatever. You can't do it unless somehow you're finding a way to get back connected to the internet. So the entire country, not just Moscow and St. Petersburg, but like the entire country has had the mobile internet shut down. And we also know that the Kremlin has also throttled a lot of social media services, more or less banning Telegram, which has been like the kind of really like the Ma Bell of Russia, basically, for the last decade or so, where everybody kind of communicates with each other and does whatever their business is. Of course, WhatsApp has been closed down. No surprise that the Western platforms have been shut down, but I think people are finding now the mobile internet being down, Telegram being down, and then of course on the front line, we've heard now that Starlink has imposed this ban of Russia's use of these terminals, giving Ukraine a little bit more of an advantage on the battlefield. We've seen that change as well in places like Zaporizhia. So there is, I think, some nervousness. There was a dissident, actually a really pro-Putin guy who his name is Remslow, who suddenly apparently went wild a couple of days ago and said Putin was nuts for going into the war. Total reversal of this kind of right-wing nut job who'd been supporting Putin very zealously up until very recently.
Wow.
So it's kind of like there's like a psychic break happening in the public in terms of just kind of a sense of foreboding that maybe something is off. But Russia's a place that lives and dies on conspiracy theories, so it's kind of hard to tell exactly what's happening. But
something's happening. Something's going on.
We've seen some pretty interesting house arrests. There's a house arrest of a general by the name of Ruslan Salykov, who was actually one of the bigger sort of providers and supporters of the Wagner Group back in the day. He's just been put under arrest for corruption, probably linked to his work with the Wagner Group. We've seen a near assassination of another Wagner Group supporter. a guy named Alexeyev, who's the GRU number 2 of the military intelligence services. And that was only just like 4 weeks ago. So there's a lot of vulnerabilities that are being exposed. And I think when you compile that with a 44% downturn in oil revenue for the country, and you look at sort of no progress on the battlefield, more and more losses. Now it's well over 1 million killed in action in Russia. If you're a Russian and you're kind of, maybe not connected to the Kremlin, you can't be looking at this and thinking this is good, right? At the end of the day, it's not a good situation, even if these oil sanctions and the waiver gets lifted. Yes, it will be important for the war machine. It will make some money, definitely billions, about 6 billion is the estimate. But the reality is it's not going to be enough to save the economy in the near term.
Oh, wow.
That's good.
Well, I hate to celebrate that, but
what was the guy's name that you said that suddenly had the break?
It's Ivan Remslo. He's like he actually was like very anti-Alexei Navalny. He actually was trying to bring lawsuits against Navalny and the anti-corruption group that he led. He was a little bit of a wingnut, but then suddenly snapped. And then apparently he was, the next day after his big explosion online, where everybody was like, what is going on with that guy? He was taken to a psychiatric hospital. So who knows?
Okay. So that's what.
Maybe he did have a break,
or I don't know. Joe Kent is doing the same thing here.
Yeah, I think so. We've got people breaking.
No psychic break.
Yeah,
it was definitely like a Joe Kent moment for sure.
Yeah.
Did you watch that interview? He had like a cold and he kept like sniffling the whole time, which was distracting. I don't know. All this money that Tucker has that he can't figure out the, how to maybe edit that out, that piece. So.
Man, I can't touch that one. I'm not touching it.
I know. I'm just throwing it out there. But I guess before we move on to the next topic, is there any? I'm just trying. Like we've been talking about the Trump Russia thing for a long time now, and
so long.
It's very frustrating because it is regarded often as conspiratorial and whatever. At this point, we're at war. Putin is actively helping our enemy in the war. Kill service members.
Again. Remember the bounties? You did. Yeah. We have bounties.
I forgot about that.
I forgot about the bounties.
And Trump's just like, it's okay.
He's like, you think we don't do that? He went into that Kremlin propaganda trick that he did. Like, you think we're not murderers?
What about
think we're not murderers? Yeah. When Bill O'Reilly asked him that, it was exact same response. He's ready for it. He knows how to handle this. He knows how to deflect. He knows what Krasnov knows how to Krasnov.
He does.
I guess I don't want to hear the dementia thing anymore. I don't want to hear it.
No, it's whatever.
It's ridiculous.
What's it going to take for people to wake up to this is my question. Or will people ever wake up to it? Does he have to just be parading with Putin down the streets of Kyiv and talk about how they're going to divvy it up before people realize that we're on the wrong side? I mean, I don't know. Is there any hope with this, I guess, is the question.
Well, the question is, when you wake up and you realize that you've got two countries with roughly 1,800 to 2,000 nuclear missiles pointed at each other, do you want to stay asleep? Can you afford to stay asleep? There's a need for a solution here. Putin is not a person that you talk with and make a bargain with and you trust, but we are in a deadly deadlock with Russia. Beyond Putin, beyond the personalities, beyond Trump, at the end of the day, we are always at risk of escalating with them. And this is the challenge, right? This is the limit, unfortunately, of where America's power really kind of ends, is in facing off against Russia. For whatever reasons, we don't find North Korea to be the same kind of challenge. I mean, maybe for obvious reasons, because, that whole regime is even more nutso and maybe less capable. But it is a challenge in the sense that Trump obviously has empathy for Putin. Whether we think he's an asset or not really doesn't matter. He's acting like one. He has been acting like one for a really long time.
Yeah.
At the same time, there is this check. There are people in the United States, you, me, other people, right? People in Congress who have said, betraying NATO, betraying Europe is not in the cards, right? That there is kind of that's a no-go zone for the United States. And it is a check on Trump's ability to make that kind of deal. And I think Putin sees that, right? We saw, for instance, how just the threat of touching Greenland ultimately saw some action in Congress, right? And that was enough. There are laws in place that restrain the president. Again, is it perfect? Is it everything? No, but for now, the challenge for these two guys is they don't have the cards either. It's not just that Zelensky doesn't have the cards, right? They actually don't hold all the cards. They are hostage to their own constituents, and they're hostage to their own egos. But more importantly, they're hostage to that bigger challenge of this nuclear rivalry that is never going to go away.
Yeah. Good answer.
Dark answer. Sorry.
Look, everything is dark. It's just that's why we have the candle. It's just dark.
That's why we have our romantic lighting.
Yeah, we have to do the candles to light up the darkness. Better to light a candle to curse the whatever it is. What's that Grateful Dead line? Light a candle, curse the glare. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to our next topic. Do you have to go, or do you want to hang out for 8 more minutes with us?
I might hang out a bit and listen to
Okay,
it.
hang out a bit.
Okay.
It doesn't mean you and I are going to know anything about this next topic.
Neither do I. None of us know.
None of us understand
we
it.
feel the need to talk about it.
Okay, but it's Strange Things, right? Are we on Strange Things?
Stranger Things.
Stranger Things. Okay, here we go.
We should have.
Yeah, we could do it. All right.
Friends don't
Set
lie.
it up. Set it up.
Friends don't lie. Okay, so this is something that has happened, and it's now trending on Twitter. Amber Woods wrote a great piece about it, I think this morning or yesterday, about this general, Major General William Neil McCasland, who goes by Neil, who is he's retired, but he was the executive secretary of the Department of Defense's Special Access Program Oversight Committee, which is a very long way of saying all of the kind of things that people write thrillers about, these mysterious things that are happening within the Department of Defense. He is basically the overseer of all of those things.
He's David Duchovny, but not quite in X-Files.
If it was Stranger Things, he would be Matthew Modine's boss.
He'd be Matthew Modine's boss in Stranger Things.
Yeah, season 1.
Yeah.
It gets down.
But this is just our fantasies about what this division and department is. We don't.
Yeah, but it does preside over things that are very top secret to the point where even most people in Congress don't know what's happening.
Okay.
So that's who this guy is. Now he is retired. He has his retired life. On February 27th, which is getting to be, it's 3.5 weeks, whatever. He lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He basically takes his wallet, his backpack, and a gun, goes outside for a walk, leaves his phone, his glasses. He doesn't have any devices with him or anything like that. Hasn't been seen since.
I mean, I'm so concerned for this man.
Yeah, but I don't know that he's.
I feel like he just walked off, or something had a break.
I don't know that was the case.
Or maybe somebody took him or something. Like, what's going on?
It's strange because
his poor family. Does he have a family?
Yes, he has his wife who has been talking to the press and assuring everybody that her husband doesn't know anything about the aliens at Roswell, doesn't have any extraterrestrial knowledge. And stuff like that, which is probably true because he did also oversee the Air Force Research Lab at Wright Pratt, which is where they keep all that stuff.
I feel so sorry for him.
Spooky.
It's just a spooky story, and there's lots of weirdness going on with it, and it's like,
someone else passed away. Someone else died.
Someone else within the thing
maybe died strangely. Someone within his the same thing, just after he disappeared. Yeah. So that's adding fuel to the fire.
So again,
I hope they find him. I'm concerned for him.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I like to think that he's just went to ground. He was like, gotta get out. But
maybe he just saw what was happening in the world and he was like, yeah, I'm out.
Yeah.
This isn't going to go well.
He's in Uruguay with Netanyahu and Epstein.
Oh God!
Right now. I don't know, but do you have any thoughts on this, Candace, or is this just?
I was thinking when you guys were talking about it, I was like, is he with that boozy general that like, what did you heard about that story? The guy, I think it was Antonio Guto, who was in Ukraine for a couple of years, and he kept like coming into meetings like stumbling drunk. He was like drinking brandy all night. And like he concussed himself several times. There was like a whole like report about how like he got wasted and then he went home and then he knocked himself out on a chair and then he like rolled over and knocked himself on the table. And it turned out that he like left some secret documents on a train on the way to Ukraine.
Yes, now I know. I remember what you're talking about. Yeah.
I feel like the entire like General Officer Corps of the United States is in like serious trouble. It's like once they shave their beards and they get rid of their beer gut, Hegseth style, they don't know what to do with themselves.
Oh no! Oh no!
No,
I don't know. It's a strange thing, and it doesn't make us feel any safer or better about the.
And it definitely is in the category. I feel terrible, and I want him found and all of that. And also, if it is the aliens, it's not now.
Right.
Not now.
Right.
It's too much. We can't do this now.
I don't.
If it is rips in the fabric of time, whatever it might be, if we're all going to suddenly see, if he saw like his self from some other time period or timeline, and said, "I'm out," and left with it. Like, are we in that? Right. In the strangeness of all of that.
What do they call quantum physics of things where they go into the thing?
The upside down. I don't know what the thing is.
But there's a thing. The portal.
Yeah. The portal.
Maybe portal.
I don't want that now.
No, we can't have that now.
That needs to stop.
No, we can't mess with the space-time
continuum.
Give us
it's pretty clear. Thank you. Yeah,
it's clear.
Later, next year, some other time.
We have this weapon called the discombobulator, which maybe he knows about. I don't know. Have you heard about this discombobulator?
No, what's that?
There was that weird weapon that they used in Venezuela.
You're talking about the Havana syndrome?
The Havana syndrome that got turned
But I think it's even more upgraded.
I think they upgraded it. Yeah.
They used it in Venezuela. It knocked out all the electronics, and everyone just immediately got like headaches and started retching.
Yeah.
And they went in and out, and that was the end. And Trump talked about it and called it the discombobulator, which sounds like a professional wrestler on the maybe the undercard of the match, but. Yeah,
it sounds like a villain in the Incredibles movie,
right.
Incredibles 4 or something.
Incredibles 4.
Yeah.
Incredibles 4, the discombobulator. Played by that guy. But
okay. So we're bringing it up just because we're bringing it up.
We're just we're throwing it out in the ether just in case basically people missed it. It's an interesting story to follow to see what might happen. Probably nothing will happen. What's going to happen is this guy's going to turn up. Netanyahu's going to, wake up and be
he's on the Appalachian Trail.
I can't believe everybody was worried about me. Yeah. What's going on? I just
remember the guy that went to I was on the Appalachian Trail, like with his lover or whatever.
Mark Sanford.
Yes.
But that was with Olivia.
He was just having an affair somewhere.
But that was with what's her nose, right? Now in hindsight, all the puzzle pieces finally coalesce. Anyway, now we're getting into silly things. So
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We've got no more silliness for
now.
No. So Candace, where can people find you? Do you have new stuff coming out that you want to talk about? Like you were at the book fair. Is it for this book? Is it out in paperback now? What's going on?
Yeah, I was at the Tucson Book Fair. Thank you very much, Putin Sledgehammer, promoting it. And we're going to be coming out with some stuff on the shadow fleets. I'm going to see how these tankers actually fare as they move through the Strait of Hormuz. So stay tuned. I'm at Candace Rondeaux on Twitter. You can also find me on LinkedIn, same name. I am on Bluesky, but I never pay attention. I promise I will get there and find you guys.
It's hard. It's hard to remember to do the thing.
It's always
all the things. Yeah. Oh, well, we just loved having you tonight,
thank
Candace.
You so much for hanging out with us. And stay safe. Stay away from the aliens. Stay out of the Straits of Hormuz.
I will stay away from the portal.
Stay away from
the portal.
Maybe the Straits of Hormuz is the portal.
Maybe it
is.
Maybe that's what's going on.
Okay. Candace, have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Candace.
All right.
She's so clear.
I know.
It's like clear-minded. It makes me feel slow.
I know.
I start to feel slower and slower.
That's the tequila talking.
Tequila. All right.
Okay. Do we have announcements?
We do. We are, as we said,
8 minutes.
That
Look
was
at
a good 8
that.
minutes. You're coming up to my neck of the
coming
woods.
up to your neck of the woods, pending unforeseen disaster on
We'll
Sunday.
put together. We still need to put together a little flyer so people can spread it around. So anyway, that's it. There'll be a live event with the two of us. A 5/8 live event.
Be like a 5.
Yeah,
we'll
a
try
week
to
from
do
Sunday.
The broadcast thingy.
Yeah.
We'll try to do that.
Yeah.
That's what we'll try to do.
We're tired. We're so tired, guys.
I am.
You're tired. I'm tired. It's been a long week. It's been a lot of traveling. Okay, so that's it. Join, subscribe. We can't wait to see if anybody comes. We just can't wait to see you. So that's all. It's always nice to see you guys, and we'll try to do more live events. Figure out how to do one down the city, in your neck of the woods, all those things.
All the things.
Okay. Oh my goodness.
Last topic.
We were going to talk about the micro penis.
We were.
And we got saved from that.
Wait, before we should tell everybody what that is.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the fight that's happening in MAGA
Catfight
world. Catfight, but also there's dogs in there for sure. So what's his name? Mark Levine?
Levin.
Mark Levin.
I found out that it's pronounced Levin.
Levin.
Not Levin.
Okay, who is he?
Or is it Levin and not
Tell everybody
Levin?
who he is again.
He's a guy. He's basically very
MAGA.
No, he's very
hawk.
associated with BB and
Yeah.
that lobby. And
He's a hawk.
Joe Kent was talking about him a lot on the Tucker Show. And
he was.
He writes columns and all this kind of stuff, and he's just very rah-rah MAGA.
Rah, blow up, rah, BB, rah, blow up Iran, blah, 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 blah. Well, did he come for Megyn Kelly? Because Megyn Kelly is there's a split. This war is splitting MAGA loyalists. So some people who were we can't be pulled into another, forever war and these wars in the Middle East and da-da. Some influencers and media folk that have been in that camp, including Tulsi Gabbard, who's like, she's lost herself completely now.
Mm-hmm.
Not that she even ever knew who she was or what language she should even be speaking, or Cyrillic coming out of her phone. But they're still in that camp. And so they're very opposed to this war and breaking from Donald. Marjorie Taylor Greene is one of them. Megyn Kelly. Lauren Boebert. Mark Levin is not. And so Mark Levin and Megyn came after Megyn Kelly, who's very much against the war, for criticizing the war on social media and called her low, whatever. Everything's with women is always hitting our IQ, hitting our whatever. Fuck off. You steal all of our shit. You appropriate all of our hard work. Our work is good enough to give you your fucking career. So, I'm sorry. I feel that way about a lot of men. I do. So, and sure, this guy, who knows what he took from some woman that was helping him the fuck out to get to where he is today, wherever that is, because I can barely remember he exists. But he hits at Megyn Kelly, right? About her not understanding things, and she just doesn't have a grasp of the world, and she's just, this dismissal. And Megyn Kelly hit back by saying, micro penis Mark Levin, it's
just about his micro penis.
It's all about his micro penis.
Yeah.
So that's why he's for this war.
Mm-hmm.
And so he hits back again because he goes to Donald and he tells Donald, and Donald comes out against Megyn Kelly saying she's really not all that smart. And Megyn Kelly's response to that is, micro penis Mark Levin ran to daddy about his micro penis. And that literally they're writing this. And then Marjorie Taylor Greene chimes in and says, I fully support Megyn Kelly telling the world about Mark Levin's micro penis and his micro penis problem. So whatever. It was funny. We were going to talk about it, but we're going to talk about something.
We did talk about it, I guess, didn't we?
There it is. I gave it. You asked me to clarify.
Well,
I'm going to be long-winded. You've been doing a show with me forever. You know how long-winded I am.
Yeah.
All right. So let's cut it down to 5 minutes. Here's what's really going on.
Yeah. This is important.
Here's a really important thing. That's MAGA's version of substantive
discourse.
Everything.
Yeah.
here's what's happening. So go ahead and set this one up.
Well, there was a big reveal, this week from Dolores Huerta that
who's 95 now.
Yeah.
And she's a massive activist, right?
And has been for
and
many
has
years,
been and was one of the big activists and supporters of the United Farm Workers, the Che Guevara movement. Cesar, I'm sorry, the Cesar Chavez movement. Yeah.
And it turns out that, he raped her and was, basically an abuser and a serial predator. And this caused shockwaves around everybody because this is a guy who's a hero in a lot of ways. Had a holiday in California for him that was actually, I think, coming up.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what prompted this. There's just a lot of, and for the work he did, rightly so, this movement, this union and all of that.
That organization, United Farm Workers, is still exists, obviously, and is reviewing the allegations, sort of looking at it. But listen, you've got to believe her. I mean, she was.
It's not just her, too.
It's not just her. There's others. So Ava DuVernay wrote something about it. I thought maybe I'd just read that.
Yeah.
Because this was an incredible reflection on the moment that we're in with this and that everyone's facing. And I just want to read what she has to say because it's this is sort of coming down, and she did a Substack about it. So kind of a little ways down there, she says, it's shocking and terribly heartbreaking for the girls and women who were abused by him and for those who love them. Also for the millions who've put Chavez on a pedestal. And then there is the specific weight of what Dolores Huerta herself carried. She co-built this movement. She bore 2 of Chavez's children. While he was lifted into something approaching sainthood, she held the truth of what he had done to her close and quiet because she believed the movement was bigger than her pain. This is going to make me cry. That is a particular kind of sacrifice that I find almost unbearable to contemplate. And now, after 60 years, she has decided to speak at 95 years old. That takes a different kind of courage and bravery. What do we do when we realize that our saints have sins of their own? The people who needed the righteousness and the right-mindedness of Cesar Chavez aren't those of us who will debate this stunning revelation from a comfortable distance, but the girls and women who trusted him, who looked up to him, who believed in him, and were harmed by him. Others who deserved better were the farm workers whose backs broke under the sun in the Central Valley, the mothers and fathers and young people who could not use the bathroom in the field and who were paid wages that kept them permanently in debt to the men who owned the land. For those hardworking people, Chavez was a hero. The grape boycott of the late 1960s, co-led by Chavez and Filipino activist Larry Italion, worked. The cortito, which had bent farm workers' spines with permanent pain for generations, was banned. These things happened. Chavez's sins can't unravel the protection his work helped create. But those people deserved a man who built a movement to protect the powerless and lived by that, not one who committed damaging and destructive crimes on the powerless. The brave women, once girls, have names we now know. I'm going to mess up all these names. Ana Murguia, Deborah Rojas, and Dolores Huerta are part of Chavez's public story now, as they should be. These women should have been able to live in spaces where their safety was not conditional on their silence. How many organizers, advocates, and everyday people have been asked, implicitly or explicitly, to swallow harm for the sake of a larger cause? It's more common than we want to believe, and it's the opposite of solidarity. It is the oldest kind of power, simply protecting itself. So what do we do with the legacy of Cesar Chavez now? Who decides what we continue to embrace and what we cast aside? The names of the abused women also exist inside the story of Picasso, who painted exquisitely and by all accounts treated the women in his life with great cruelty. At least 2 of his mistresses died by suicide, and yet his paintings still hang in places of great esteem. We still look at them, should we? Roman Polanski, in 1977, he pleaded guilty to unlawful sexual intercourse with a 13-year-old girl, then fled the United States before sentencing. He still won the Oscar in 2003. He was given the award for Best Director for The Pianist. The man has lived comfortably in Europe for nearly half a century as a fugitive from justice. He received Hollywood's highest filmmaking honor while being an admitted child predator and rapist. Who decides what we continue to embrace and what we cast aside? We do not dance to R. Kelly songs anymore, or many of us don't anyway. R. Kelly was convicted on multiple charges of child sexual abuse. He's now serving a 30-year prison sentence. This is the same man who gave event planners everywhere, "I Believe I Can Fly." That song is played at graduations, funerals, moments of personal hope for millions of people to this day. The song is still beautiful. And for club goers, his other music still bumps. But all the while, the singer-songwriter's sexual abuse victims were children. Children. Who decides what we can continue to embrace and what we cast aside? How do we parse this out? Can we or should we separate harm and evil from the good a person does? Wagner, whose anti-Semitic writings made him a favorite composer of the Third Reich and whose music Hitler loved, is still played in opera houses around the world. Should we still listen? Jefferson, who wrote that all men are created equal but enslaved over 600 human beings. 600 human beings enslaved them in the course of his lifetime, including the children he fathered with a woman he enslaved, Sally Hemings. Should we still believe his words? She goes on. It's incredible. I don't think answers are simple. We know that movements are not men and that art is not the artist. I know that, but still, whatever complexity we extend to the people who did do great things, we have to also consider and make space for the people they harmed. Equal space. I don't think that harm can be a footnote. A victim's pain is not a philosophical dilemma for us to write about on Substack. It is their life, their heart, their body, their mind, their broken spirit. They are owed something more than our debate. Because the work is real and the harm is real. Holding both truths at once is actually the harder and more honest path. It asks us to grieve what was lost without pretending it was never there, and to reckon with what was done without erasing the people who were hurt in the doing of it. Perfect vessels do not exist. In the explosive New York Times expose on Chavez this week, one of his victims is profiled. Her name is Esmeralda Lopez. Her quote below sums up my unruly thoughts on the matter better than anything I've written here. Quote, "It makes you rethink history, all those heroes," Ms. Lopez said. The movement, that's the hero. Indeed, every time we let ourselves love a symbol more than we love the people the symbol claimed to serve, we are setting ourselves up. The mural is not the movement. The name on the boulevard is not the work. The hero is every person who showed up in the fields, who boycotted the grapes, who believed their labor and their life deserved dignity, and who deserved in return to be safe inside the thing they were building. The true heroism lives in the harder, messier, more honest place where we hold all of it at once and keep going anyway, imperfect as we all are. That is spectacular.
Yeah.
Piece of writing. She's right. And I just a reckoning is a hell of a thing to live through as an observer.
Yeah.
And certainly for all of these women who were harmed. I can't imagine.
Yeah. I mean, the key, I think, point aside from everything else, and the takeaway is that the imperfect vessels, people aren't perfect, Lord knows, and putting all your faith in someone human is ultimately pretty much always going to lead to disappointment in some way, shape, or form, I think, down the line.
Yeah.
And I don't know. The word iconoclast comes from Byzantine.
Yeah.
And
you've talked about that before.
It means basically there was a fight in whatever it was, the 6th century, about whether or not they were allowed to have these icons, these printed paintings. And the iconoclasts were the ones that took the paintings down and smashed them. So they broke the idols, the chasm of the idol, of the icons. And I think that speaks to this too. It's you can't look up at people worshipfully. You can take inspiration, and I think it's people should take inspiration from where they take inspiration and not try to police it so much. But the main thing with this is that this is I think in general a moment of it's a exponential Me Too kind of thing now, where we're looking at all of the Epstein stuff, we're looking at all of the Trump involvement, we're looking at this, we're looking at any manner of things, this network that you talked about in the first topic of all of these very wealthy, disgusting, depraved people who have enormous amounts of power, and shouldn't and don't deserve to treat people like that. No matter how much money they have, no matter how much power they have. And, the only thing that we can do in our position, I think, is expose it and talk about it and not let it go away.
Yeah.
And, that's what we're going to keep doing here, That's all I got. It's depressing and it's sad and it's
and we don't usually like to end on a sour note. And it's not a sour note. It's look, so we had last week, right? Our great friend
Zareen,
Rosanna, hit back at Harvey.
Yeah.
Harvey Weinstein tried to, come out like a genie in a bottle, come back to materialize himself as a reborn figure. Please take me back into the world, and then we haven't heard from him since. Rosanna was like, yeah, no, that's not happening. And that statement she had came with that complexity of, who he was, right, and the work he did, and what he also did, and these things happened, and I do think that I'm pleased that what happened with Me Too, by breaking the conversation out into the open and having women finally be heard, in terms of the abuse that they had to suffer to keep us, for the system to stay in place and keep going, that other people were profiting off of, benefiting from. We all, and the men that just kept getting carried through regardless of their actions, their harmful acts. That was the conversation breaking through in society. Yeah. Right. And it feels like at times, with being thrown back into this administration, putting a adjudicated rapist back in the White House, one of Jeffrey Epstein's, all the stuff we're living through with this guy, and all the protection of these men, that this administration and our own Department of Justice is going to great lengths in order to keep protecting these men. It feels like that's a defeat, but I think, as horrific as to learn this stuff, to learn is speaking out at 95 years old and putting the truth on the record and making sure it goes on the record and allowing everybody to adjust to the reality of yet another powerful man regardless of whether his power was used for good or bad, is a way to extend the good work that was done with breaking the silence.
Yeah.
That is sort of stronger and more persistent, it seems now, and has longevity to it. That does hearten me. I thought maybe it would just get weaponized, fucked up, and go away. And I feel like the courage that was just exhibited by Dolores, just that courage and that truth is substantive to me in that, in the vein of, we can keep going with this. We can keep telling, women can keep speaking the truth about what they endure, the facts that actually happened, and be believed.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can change.
There's too many women that stuff has happened to keep everybody silent,
Yeah.
It's not statistically possible.
It's not possible.
And it's a matter of whether or not society and the people in power are going to believe. And that's the Epstein thing in a nutshell. You have all these women for years shouting from the rooftops about this, and legacy media with their thumb in their ass being like, I don't know, we have to get the files. Do we need the files? Why do we need the fucking files? We know what these guys did. It's worse than what we thought, but what we know was bad enough.
Investigate and prosecute.
That's what we have to do. So yeah, that's what I have to say. But it's just a strange week. But I feel like it's now the spring, and the winter is over, even though it's
not over where I am. But yeah, technically, spring is on the horizon. We could say it that way.
I think what that means is
we're getting through it.